I'm Bella, 28 years old, and I stood frozen as my mother's manicured nails dug into my arm. Don't you dare ruin Madison's perfect day, she hissed, her smile never wavering for the wedding photographer. My sister's white gown sparkled under the chandeliers while blood seeped through my sleeve where mother's nails broke skin. The microphone waited on stage for the maid of honor speech I was supposed to give. But the truth about Madison's perfect life would destroy everything our family built on lies. Before we dive into this incredible story of family betrayal and redemption, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Are you someone who understands the pain of being the family scapegoat? Please hit that like button if you believe truth matters more than keeping up appearances. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that will leave you speechless. Now, let me take you back to where this nightmare began, because what happened at that wedding was years in the making. Growing up in the Morrison household meant living in Madison's shadow. She was 3 years older and infinitely more perfect in our parents' eyes. While I struggled through middle school with average grades, Madison was already winning state debate championships and planning her path to Harvard Law. Our childhood photos tell the story better than words ever could. Madison, front and center in her pristine dresses, me slightly blurred in the background, usually with scraped knees or grass stains that mother would scold me for later. By the time Madison graduated from Harvard Law with honors, I had dropped out of community college to work at a veterinary clinic. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became mother's favorite refrain, repeated at every family gathering like some twisted prayer. Father was quieter, but no less cutting in his disappointment. He'd look at me over his newspaper when Madison called to discuss her latest case victory, and I could see the question in his eyes. Where did we go wrong with this one? Family dinners became performances where I played the silent audience to Madison's one-woman show. She'd sweep in wearing designer suits that cost more than I made in 3 months, regaling us with stories of corporate mergers and high-profile clients. I'd sit there in my scrubs, still smelling faintly of antiseptic and dog shampoo, pushing food around my plate, while mother hung on Madison's every word. Bella helped deliver puppies today. I'd sometimes offer only to be met with mother's tight smile and quick subject change back to Madison's achievements. The engagement announcement came 6 months before the wedding delivered with typical Madison fanfare. Richard Sterling, son of Senator Sterling, had proposed at the governor's charity gala. The ring could probably fund a small country's economy for a year. Mother actually cried tears of joy, something I'd never seen her do for any of my accomplishments. "The Sterling family? Oh, Madison, you've really made it," she gushed, already planning how to casually mention her daughter's connection to political royalty at her book club. What shocked everyone, including me, was when Madison asked me to be her maid of honor. The room fell silent when she made the announcement at Sunday dinner. Mother's fork actually paused midway to her mouth, a piece of salmon hanging precariously as she processed this unexpected development. "Are you sure, dear?" She finally managed her tone, suggesting Madison might be having a stroke. "Of course," Madison replied with that perfect smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Bella's my only sister. Who else would I choose?" Mother cornered me in the kitchen later while I loaded the dishwasher. "This is your chance," she said, gripping my shoulders hard enough to leave bruises. "Your chance to prove you're not completely worthless to this family. Don't you dare embarrass Madison or ruin her moment. For once in your life, Bella, don't be a disappointment." The weight of her words settled on my chest like a physical thing, making it hard to breathe. The preparation meetings were exercises in humiliation. Madison's other bridesmaids were carbon copies of her successful lawyers, doctors, and business executives who treated me like hired help rather than the maid of honor. "Oh, you work at a vet clinic. How quaint," said Stephanie, a prosecutor who specialized in putting away drug dealers while carrying a purse that ironically cost more than most drug deals. They'd discuss vacation homes in the Hamptons while I calculated if I could afford my rent that month. The bachelor and bachelorette weekend in Vegas should have been fun. Instead, it became the first crack in Madison's perfect facade. We'd booked a suite at the Cosmopolitan, and I watched Madison transform throughout the night. With each champagne toast and tequila shot, Her careful composure slipped away like makeup in the desert heat. By 3 in the morning, I found her sobbing on the bathroom floor, designer dress bunched around her knees, mascara creating abstract art on her cheeks. "It's all an arrangement," she slurred, clutching my hand with desperate strength. "The whole thing, Bella. The engagement, the wedding, everything. It's just business." I tried to make sense of her words through the alcohol haze, but she kept rambling about contracts and agreements, about Richard not being what everyone thought. "You have to keep quiet," she begged, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my skin. "Promise me you'll keep quiet. You don't understand what's at stake." I held her hair back while she vomited champagne and secrets into the toilet, wondering if this was the first real moment I'd shared with my sister in years. The next morning, she emerged from her room looking flawless again, acting as if the breakdown never happened. But I noticed things after that night. The way Richard never quite looked at Madison when they were together, how their kisses for photos seemed rehearsed and mechanical, like actors who'd run the scene too many times. The final red flag came when I overheard Mother on the phone with her financial advisor. She was liquidating their retirement accounts, every penny going toward Madison's dream wedding. "It's an investment," she assured Father later. "Once Madison's part of the Sterling family, doors will open for all of us." I wanted to scream that they were betting their future on a wedding that might be nothing more than an elaborate performance, but Madison's tearful Vegas confession had been sworn to secrecy. 2 months before the wedding, everything changed. I'd stopped by Madison's apartment to drop off bridesmaid dress alterations when fate intervened in the form of a buzzing phone. Madison was in the shower, and her personal phone lay on the kitchen counter screen, lighting up with message after message. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the preview notification showed enough. "Can't wait to hold you again tonight. Your future husband doesn't deserve you. Love, D." My hands shook as I picked up the phone. Madison never password protected it, probably confident in her ability to keep her perfect life compartmentalized. What I found destroyed any remaining illusions I had about my sister. Text messages, photos, and videos dating back 2 years with Professor Daniel Chen from her law school. Not just an affair, but a full relationship complete with "I love yous" and plans for a future that definitely didn't include Richard Sterling. The shower stopped running, and I quickly set the phone down, my mind racing. Madison emerged in a silk robe, hair wrapped in a towel, and immediately saw my face. "You looked at my phone," she stated, not a question but a resigned acknowledgement. For a moment, the mask dropped completely, and I saw my sister, really saw her perhaps for the first time. She looked exhausted, like someone who'd been running a marathon in heels and was finally allowed to stop. "Sit down," she said, pouring us both wine even though it was barely noon. "You want to know the truth, fine. But remember, you asked for this." What followed was a confession that recontextualized everything I thought I knew about Madison's perfect life. Richard Sterling was gay, had been his whole life, but a gay son wouldn't fit the senator's political image. Richard needed a wife to secure his inheritance and political future. Madison needed the Sterling name and connections to make partner at her firm before 30. "It's a business arrangement," she explained, swirling her wine like we were discussing stock portfolios instead of her selling her life to the highest bidder. "Richard and I are friends, actually. We understand each other. He has his boyfriends, I have Daniel. After 5 years, we'll have an amicable divorce and we'll both get what we want." She made it sound so simple, so logical, like choosing between 2 brands of coffee instead of living a fundamental lie. "And Daniel's okay with this?" I asked, thinking of the passionate messages I'd seen. Madison's laugh was bitter. "Daniel thinks I'm going to leave Richard after a year. He doesn't understand how the real world works, Bella. Not everyone can afford to follow their hearts and work at vet clinics." The dig was subtle but effective, reminding me of my place in the family hierarchy. "What about Mom and Dad? They're spending everything on this wedding." I pressed, feeling anger build in my chest. Madison's expression hardened. "That's their choice. I never asked them to. Besides, once I'm a sterling, I'll be able to help them more than your puppy delivery service ever could." The cruelty in her voice shocked me, but not as much as her next manipulation. "You don't understand pressure, Bella." She continued, tears suddenly appearing in her eyes. "You were always free to fail. Mom and Dad expected nothing from you so you could be whatever you wanted. But me, I had to be perfect. Do you know what that's like, to never be allowed a mistake? This arrangement with Richard is my one chance to have everything they wanted for me, while keeping something for myself with Daniel." Her tears seemed genuine, and despite everything, I found myself feeling sorry for her. Growing up as the golden child came with its own prison bars made of expectations and achievements that could never be enough. I agreed to keep her secret, rationalizing that maybe everyone could win in this scenario. Madison would get her career, Richard would get his cover, and our parents would get their prestigious connection. Who was I to judge? Of course, Mother found me sitting in my car outside Madison's building, trying to process everything. She knocked on my window with her signature impatient rap. "What are you doing here, and why do you look like someone died?" she demanded, sliding into the passenger seat uninvited. I couldn't tell her the truth, so I mumbled something about feeling overwhelmed with maid of honor duties. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Bella," she sighed. "Stop being jealous of your sister's success. Not everything is about you. Some of us are actually happy that Madison's making something of herself." The irony of her words defending Madison's fake engagement while calling me selfish would have been funny if it didn't hurt so much. Father was no better when I got home, barely looking up from his tablet to say, "Your mother told me you're having another one of your episodes. At least try to keep it together until after the wedding." The stress began manifesting physically. Jake, my boyfriend of 2 years, finally reached his breaking point during what should have been a romantic dinner. "I can't do this anymore," he said quietly, pushing his pasta around his plate. "Your family treats you like garbage and you just take it. You're keeping secrets that are eating you alive and you won't talk to me about any of it. I love you, Bella, but I can't watch you destroy yourself for people who don't appreciate you." I wanted to beg him to stay to explain everything, but the words stuck in my throat. How could I tell him that my sister's perfect life was a sham, that my parents were bankrupting themselves for a fake wedding, that I was complicit in all of it? So I let him walk away, adding his absence to the growing void in my chest. That night, I had my first panic attack, gasping for air on my bathroom floor while Madison texted about flower arrangements. Dr. Harrison, my boss at the clinic, noticed immediately the next day. "Bella, you look like hell," he said bluntly but not unkindly. "And you've been distracted. Nearly gave Mrs. Patterson's poodle the wrong medication yesterday. He sent me home early and told me to take the weekend off. Whatever's going on, you need to deal with it before it affects the animals. They depend on us to be present." That evening, a delivery arrived at my apartment. An enormous bouquet of roses with a card in Madison's distinctive handwriting. "Thanks for understanding, sis. Couldn't do this without you. M." The flowers were beautiful, expensive, and somehow they made me feel worse. Each bloom felt like a bribe payment for my silence. I threw them in the trash, then immediately felt guilty and fished them out. Even in my anger, I couldn't bring myself to waste something Madison had given me. The patterns of a lifetime are hard to break. 1 month before the wedding, I stumbled onto the second betrayal by accident. I'd gone to my parents' house to help with wedding favor assembly, one of the few tasks deemed simple enough for me to handle without supervision. Mother was at her book club, and Father was golfing, leaving me alone in the house. While looking for ribbon in Father's study, I knocked over a stack of papers, sending documents scattering across the floor. As I gathered them up, certain words jumped out at me. Second mortgage, home equity line of credit, personal loan. My stomach dropped as I pieced together the financial massacre unfolding in black and white. My parents weren't just spending their retirement. They were leveraging everything they owned for Madison's wedding. The house I grew up in, the one they'd spent 30 years paying off, was now collateral for flower arrangements and ice sculptures. I took photos of everything with my phone, my hands shaking so badly I had to retake several shots. The total debt was staggering, more than they could possibly repay on their fixed income. They were essentially gambling their entire future on Madison's marriage to Richard, providing some nebulous return on investment. Did Madison know? She had to know. Our parents weren't exactly financially sophisticated. They would have asked for her advice before taking such drastic steps. The confrontation came the next day at Madison's final dress fitting. I waited until the seamstress stepped out, then laid my phone on the platform where Madison stood like a queen surveying her domain. The wedding dress cost more than most people's cars, each crystal hand-sewn, each layer of silk carefully crafted to create the illusion of perfection. "Explain this," I said, simply swiping through the photos of financial documents. Madison's face remained impassive as she studied the screen. "So they took out some loans? What's your point?" Her casualness about our parents' financial ruin stunned me more than any screaming match could have. "My point. They're going to lose everything, Madison. Their house, their savings, their future. All for your fake wedding. I didn't ask them to do this," she said, stepping down from the platform with practiced grace. "They offered. They insisted, actually. Said it was their gift to me, their investment in the family's future. Was I supposed to turn them down, hurt their feelings?" She moved to the mirror, adjusting her veil with steady hands while our parents' lives crumbled in her wake. "You have money." I pressed, remembering the designer clothes, the luxury apartment, the weekend trips to exclusive resorts. "You could help them." Madison's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "I have $500,000 in savings, and yes, I could pay for this entire wedding myself. But I earned that money, Bella. 80-hour weeks, sacrificing everything, being perfect every single day. Why should I spend it on their choices? Because they're our parents." I shouted, losing control of my carefully maintained composure. "Because they sacrificed everything for us, for you, to give you the opportunities to become who you are." Madison's reflection in the mirror smiled coldly. "They sacrificed for their own egos, Bella. They wanted a successful daughter to brag about at country club dinners. Well, they got one. The bills come due. I threatened to tell them everything, the affair. The arrangement with Richard, the fact that she could save them, but wouldn't. That's when Madison revealed her first weapon. "Go ahead," she said, turning to face me fully. "Tell them. And while you're at it, should I tell them about your arrest record?" The blood drained from my face. I'd been 19 defending my roommate from an assault at a party. The charges were dropped, but the arrest remained on record. Madison had promised to keep it secret when she'd helped me navigate the legal system. "That was self-defense, and you know it," I whispered. But Madison was already scrolling through her phone. "Sure, but does Dad know his baby girl spent a night in jail? Does Mom know you were at a party with drugs present? I have the police report right here. Amazing what a law degree and connections can dig up." The threat hung between us like a blade. My parents' disappointment in me was already unbearable. Adding this would cement my status as the family failure forever. I backed down, but something fundamental had shifted. I started documenting everything, obsessively. Screenshots of text messages, photos of documents, recordings of conversations when legally permissible. If Madison wanted to play with blackmail, I'd arm myself accordingly. The next family dinner was torture, watching my parents gush about the wedding while knowing they were signing their financial death warrant with every vendor contract. That's when Richard's sister Caroline approached me. I was leaving the grocery store, arms full of stress-eating supplies, when she appeared at my car. "Bella, we need to talk," she said, glancing around nervously. Caroline was everything Richard wasn't: rebellious, outspoken, and openly gay. The Sterling family barely acknowledged her existence, which made her presence in my parking lot all the more surprising. "I know about the arrangement," she said without preamble. "Richard's my brother, and I love him, but this has gone too far. Your sister isn't who you think she is." We sat in my car while Caroline revealed Madison's pattern of behavior throughout law school and beyond. The professor affair wasn't her first. Madison had a history of strategic relationships with powerful men, always documented, always with an exit strategy that left her ahead. She's got files on everyone. Caroline explained. Professor's classmates now, Richard. Photos, recordings, anything that could be useful later. Richard showed me some of what she has on him, things that would destroy not just his political career, but his entire life. He's trapped, Bella. We all are. The revelation sent me back to Madison's apartment when I knew she'd be at work. I told the doorman I was picking up wedding stuff and he let me in without question. What I found in Madison's home office confirmed everything Caroline had said. A locked drawer that took me 20 minutes to pick open revealed a treasure trove of blackmail material. File after file of compromising information on colleagues, friends, even family members. There was a file with my name on it containing not just the arrest record but photos from college I didn't even remember taking carefully edited to look incriminating. But it was the file labeled Mom and Dad that broke something inside me. Photos of father at what looked like a casino, probably from a business trip years ago, edited to suggest a gambling problem. Emails between mother and an old flame from before she married father, innocent correspondence made to look like an emotional affair. Madison had been collecting ammunition against our own parents, preparing for some future war only she could see coming. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. Hope you found what you were looking for. Smile for the camera. I looked up to see a small security camera. I'd missed its red light blinking accusingly. I'd been so focused on the files I'd forgotten Madison's paranoia would extend to surveillance in her own home. Another text. Breaking and entering is a felony, sis. See you at dinner. That night's family dinner was a masterclass in manipulation. Madison arrived late, apologizing profusely about a fictional client emergency. She hugged me extra long, whispering, "We need to talk after dinner," in my ear. Throughout the meal, she was the perfect daughter complimenting mother's cooking, asking father about his golf game, even pretending to be interested in my work at the clinic. Our parents beamed completely unaware of the viper at their table. After dinner, Madison cornered me in my childhood bedroom. "You're getting sloppy, Bella," she said, closing the door behind her. "Breaking into my apartment. Really, what would Mom and Dad think?" I stayed silent, knowing anything I said would be used against me. "Here's what's going to happen," she continued. "You're going to be the perfect maid of honor. You're going to smile, hold my bouquet, and give a touching speech about sisterly love. And then you're going to fade back into the background where you belong." "Or what?" I finally asked, exhausted by the games. Madison smiled, and for the first time I saw our mother in her expression. The same calculating coldness, the same dismissal of anything that didn't serve her purposes. "Or I'll destroy you, Bella. Your job, your reputation, any chance you have of ever being more than the family disappointment. I've been preparing for this my whole life. You're not even playing the same game." 2 weeks before the wedding, the final pieces of Madison's true plan revealed themselves. I was at the clinic suturing a German shepherd's paw when Dr. Harrison called me into his office. His usually kind face was creased with concern. "Bella, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Are you having substance abuse issues?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "What, no?" "Why would you even ask that?" He turned his computer monitor toward me, showing an email from the veterinary board. "Someone filed a complaint saying you've been stealing ketamine from our supply, that they've seen you impaired during procedures. There are photos attached." The images were from the Vegas bachelorette party, carefully cropped and edited to remove context. A photo of me holding Madison's hair back became me hunched over in what looked like drug-induced illness. A shot of me helping her walk became me stumbling, clearly intoxicated. "This is insane," I breathed, recognizing Madison's handiwork immediately. "Dr. Harrison, you know me. You've known me for 5 years. Have you ever seen me impaired? Has any medication ever gone missing?" He shook his head slowly. "No, which is why I'm talking to you instead of suspending you immediately. But Bella, the board takes these complaints seriously. There will be an investigation." I explained what I could without sounding completely unhinged, mentioning family drama and a difficult wedding situation. Dr. Harrison listened patiently, then said something that gave me hope. I've dealt with manipulative family members before. Document everything, Bella. And consider getting a lawyer. He gave me the rest of the day off to start gathering evidence for my defense. At home, I was organizing my documentation when I heard voices in the hallway. My apartment had thin walls, and I recognized the building manager's voice, along with another man's. "She's been reported for drug dealing," the stranger said. "We need to search the apartment." My blood ran cold. I grabbed my phone and started recording, then opened my door. "Excuse me, what's going on?" The building manager looked uncomfortable. "Miss Morrison, this gentleman says he's from the DEA. He has a warrant to search your apartment." I demanded to see identification and the warrant, my hands shaking as I filmed everything. The agent hesitated, then produced documents that looked official at first glance. But something felt wrong. Real DEA agents don't usually announce their investigations to building managers first. "I'm calling my lawyer," I said, bluffing, since I didn't have one. The man's expression flickered. "That won't be necessary if you cooperate." Red flag. Real law enforcement would never discourage someone from seeking legal counsel. I called 911 instead, reporting suspicious individuals claiming to be federal agents. The fake agent tried to leave, but I kept filming, getting clear shots of his face and license plate. The real police arrived within minutes, and it turned out the agent was a private investigator Madison had hired. He was arrested for impersonating a federal officer, and I had it all on video. But the damage to my reputation was already spreading. Neighbors stared at me with suspicion, and my landlord called to express concerns about my tenancy. That evening I met with Caroline again, this time at a coffee shop downtown. She looked worse than before, stress etched in every line of her face. "Richard tried to break the engagement," she said without greeting. "Told Madison he couldn't go through with it. She showed him a video that would end him, Bella. Not just politically, but criminally. I can't tell you what's on it, but it's bad enough that he's considering—" She trailed off, but I understood. Richard was so trapped he was contemplating suicide as his only escape. "There's something else," Caroline continued. "I've been investigating Madison's finances, the money she claims to have earned. It doesn't add up. Her salary as a junior associate, even with bonuses, couldn't account for her savings. She's been running something on the side, Bella. I think she's been blackmailing people for years." We were interrupted by my phone buzzing. Jake, my ex-boyfriend, was calling. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Bella, I'm at the precinct," he said urgently. "Someone called in an anonymous tip that you had drugs in your car. I recognized your name when the call came in, and I volunteered to check it out myself." My heart hammered in my chest. "And there was a planted bag of pills in your glove compartment. I've logged it as evidence, but I'm noting irregularities in the tip and the placement. Bella, someone's trying to frame you, and they're getting desperate. The pills were prescription opioids enough to charge you with intent to distribute." I thanked Jake profusely, but he wasn't done. "There's more. I pulled some strings and looked into previous tips about you. Someone's been calling in complaints for months, trying to establish a pattern. It's all been documented as unfounded, but whoever's doing this is playing a long game. The revelation that Madison had been orchestrating my downfall for months, not weeks, changed everything. This wasn't reactive manipulation. It was a calculated campaign to destroy me. But why? What threat did I pose to her that warranted such elaborate schemes? The answer came from an unexpected source, Daniel Chen, Madison's secret lover. He called me the night before the rehearsal dinner, his voice strained with emotion. "Bella, I know you don't know me, but I need to talk to you about Madison. Can we meet?" Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a park near my apartment, and I hardly recognized the broken man before me as the confident professor from Madison's photos. "She's pregnant," he said without preamble. 3 months. It's mine. The implications hit me immediately. Madison's wedding was in 2 weeks. A pregnancy would derail everything, expose the affair, and void whatever agreement she had with Richard. "Does she know?" I asked, though the answer seemed obvious. Daniel laughed bitterly. "Of course she knows. She's known for weeks. Told me she'd handle it that after she married Richard and secured her position she'd divorce him, and we'd be together. But I prompted, sensing more to the story. Daniel pulled out his phone, showing me a bank statement. But then she started asking for money. Said she needed it for medical expenses to keep the pregnancy quiet until after the wedding. I've given her almost $200,000, Bella. My entire inheritance from my grandmother. And yesterday she told me she needs more or she'll claim I assaulted her. The final piece clicked into place. Madison wasn't just manipulating everyone for power or prestige. She was running a sophisticated extortion ring. The pregnancy gave her leverage over Daniel, just like she had leverage over Richard, our parents, and now me. Everyone in her orbit was either a victim or a potential mark. The successful lawyer persona was just a cover for something much darker. "Will you help me stop her?" Daniel asked, desperation clear in his voice. "I have recordings of our conversations, proof of the affair and the blackmail. But I need someone the family will listen to." I thought about my parents about to lose everything. About Richard contemplating death as an escape. About my own career hanging by a thread. The answer was obvious. "Yes," I said. "We're going to stop her." The rehearsal dinner was held at the Sterling family's country club, a monument to old money and older traditions. I arrived early, helping with place cards and centerpieces while Madison held court with the wedding party. She looked radiant, not a hint of the stress she was causing everyone around her. When our eyes met across the room, she smiled and blew me a kiss. The gesture looked sisterly to observers, but felt like a sniper taking aim. During cocktail hour, I overheard Madison talking to her law school friends. "Poor Bella," she said loud enough for me to hear. "She's been struggling lately. Mental health issues run in our family, you know. We're all just hoping she holds it together through the ceremony." The group made sympathetic noises while I gripped my champagne flute hard enough to fear it might shatter. The dinner itself was torture. I was seated at the head table, forced to smile while speaker after speaker praised Madison and Richard's perfect love. Senator Sterling gave a particularly nauseating speech about family values and the importance of choosing the right partner to build a legacy. I caught Richard's eye during his father's toast and saw my own desperation reflected there. Caroline sat at a back table, having been relegated to distant relative status, nursing what looked like her fourth martini. Madison's speech was a masterpiece of manipulation. She spoke about growing up with me, carefully painting herself as the protective older sister who always looked out for her fragile sibling. "Bella's always been special," she said, and the word dripped with false sweetness. "She sees the world differently than the rest of us. More simply, perhaps. It's why she's so good with animals. They don't judge her limitations." I felt my parents' eyes on me, waiting to see if I'd prove Madison right by reacting badly. So I smiled and raised my glass when she finished playing my part in the charade. But inside, something had finally snapped. The years of subtle digs, the constant comparisons, the systematic destruction of my self-worth, it all crystallized into a cold clarity. Madison wasn't just my tormentor. She was a predator who needed to be stopped. After dinner, while everyone mingled, Madison cornered me near the restrooms. "You've been busy," she hissed, dropping her public persona entirely. "Meeting with Daniel. Really? Did you think I wouldn't find out?" She grabbed my wrist, squeezing hard enough to leave marks. "Whatever little alliance you think you've formed, forget it. Daniel's mine, just like Richard, just like Mom and Dad. You're nothing, Bella. You've always been nothing." "You're right," I said quietly, which seemed to surprise her. "I have been nothing. The family disappointment, the failure, the one who couldn't live up to perfect Madison. But you know what? Being nothing means I have nothing left to lose." I pulled my wrist free and walked away, leaving her standing there for once without the last word. The next morning, Madison escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. I woke to pounding on my door and found 2 police officers with a warrant to search my apartment. This time, it was real. They found planted evidence everywhere: drug paraphernalia in my bathroom, stolen veterinary supplies under my bed, even forged prescriptions with my signature. It was too much too obvious, but that didn't matter in the moment. I was arrested and spent 6 hours in custody before Jake could arrange bail. The charges would be dropped eventually, he assured me, since the evidence was clearly planted, but the damage was done. Dr. Harrison had no choice but to suspend me pending investigation. My neighbors looked at me like I was dangerous. My landlord served me with an eviction notice. In less than 24 hours, Madison had destroyed my life. But she'd made one mistake. In her eagerness to frame me, she'd overplayed her hand. The sheer volume of evidence, all appearing overnight, made it obvious someone was setting me up. Jake worked tirelessly to document the inconsistencies, and other officers began taking notice. Whoever did this, one detective told me, they're either very stupid or very desperate. Caroline was waiting when I got home, and she looked terrible. Her usual put-together appearance was gone, replaced by smeared makeup and wrinkled clothes. "Richard's in the hospital," she said quickly. "Overdose. He's stable, but Madison..." She visited him this morning. Told him if he didn't go through with the wedding, she'd release everything. He took pills right after she left. The image of Richard in a hospital bed, driven to attempt suicide by my sister's cruelty, finally broke through my last reservations. Madison wasn't just selfish or ambitious. She was genuinely dangerous. How many people had she pushed to the brink? How many lives had she destroyed in her climb to the top? And how many more would she hurt if she wasn't stopped? That evening, I met with Daniel and Caroline to form a plan. We had pieces of evidence, but nothing definitive enough to stop the wedding. "She's too careful," Daniel said, showing us encrypted files he'd managed to copy. "Everything incriminating is coded or hidden behind legal language." Caroline nodded grimly. "Richard said she keeps the real evidence in a safety deposit box. Videos, documents, things that could destroy dozens of people." "So we get them," I said simply. Both looked at me like I'd suggested robbing Fort Knox. "How?" Caroline asked. "We don't even know which bank, and we'd need her key." I thought about Madison's habits, her patterns, the one thing she'd never expect me to notice or remember. "I know where she keeps her important keys," I said slowly. "And I think I know which bank. She opened an account there right after law school, mentioned it was for insurance." The plan was insane, possibly illegal, and definitely dangerous. But as I looked at my co-conspirators, a disowned Sterling and a broken professor, I realized we were Madison's casualties, the collateral damage of her ambition. If we didn't stop her, who would? How many more lives would she destroy? The wedding was in 1 week. We had that long to bring down my sister's empire of lies. The morning of Madison's wedding dawned clear and bright, a perfect June day that seemed to mock the turmoil beneath the surface. I stood in the bridal suite at the Sterling's country estate, watching Madison's team of stylists work their magic. My sister sat at the center of it, all serene as a queen, holding court, occasionally catching my eye in the mirror, with a smile that promised retribution for my recent actions. The past week had been a whirlwind of preparation, both for the wedding and for what I planned to do during it. Daniel, Caroline, and I had managed to access Madison's safety deposit box, finding exactly what we feared: hundreds of files containing blackmail material on judges, politicians, business leaders, and yes, our own family. The scope of her operation was staggering. She wasn't just an ambitious lawyer. She was running a criminal empire built on secrets and fear. "Bella, stop fidgeting," Mother snapped, adjusting my bridesmaid dress for the 10th time. "I swear you can't even stand still properly. Thank God Madison only has to do this once." If only she knew that her perfect daughter had orchestrated this entire farce, that the Sterling family fortune she was so eager to access came with a price tag that would destroy us all. But today, finally, the truth would come out. The other bridesmaids fluttered around Madison, complimenting her dress, her hair, her jewelry, each hoping to curry favor with the future Mrs. Sterling. I watched it all with new eyes, seeing the calculated nature of every interaction. Madison had chosen her court carefully ambitious women who would never question her, never dig deeper than the surface perfection she presented. I was the only wild card and she'd spent months trying to neutralize me. 500 guests. Madison mused as the makeup artist worked on her eyes. Including 3 federal judges, 12 state legislators, and enough corporate executives to run a small country. This is more than a wedding, ladies. It's a coronation. The bridesmaids laughed as if she'd made a joke, but I heard the truth in her words. This was Madison's moment of triumph, the culmination of years of careful planning and ruthless manipulation. Father knocked and entered, pausing at the sight of his eldest daughter in full bridal regalia. For a moment, his expression softened into something almost like love, and I felt a pang for the family we could have been. "You look beautiful, Madison," he said quietly. "Your mother and I are so proud." Madison rose gracefully to embrace him, and I saw her whisper something in his ear that made him stiffen slightly before nodding. As the photographer corralled us for group shots, I felt the weight of what I was about to do. In my bouquet, carefully hidden among the white roses, and baby's breath were USB drives containing copies of Madison's files. The wedding videographer hired by the Sterlings to capture every moment had no idea his equipment would soon broadcast evidence of fraud, extortion, and criminal conspiracy to 500 of the state's most influential people. Richard looked like a ghost when we lined up for the processional. His attempt at suicide had been covered up as exhaustion. But those of us who knew the truth could see the hollow defeat in his eyes. His best man, a cousin who clearly knew nothing of the arrangement, kept clapping him on the shoulder and making jokes about wedding night jitters. Caroline stood with the guests having been denied a place in the wedding party, her phone ready to upload everything to social media the moment I gave the signal. The music began, and we processed down the aisle of the outdoor venue. Hundreds of faces turned to watch a sea of wealth and privilege gathered to witness what they believed was a fairy tale union. The Sterling family had spared no expense. Thousands of flowers created a fragrant canyon. Crystal chandeliers hung from the trees, and a full orchestra provided the soundtrack to this elaborate lie. I took my place at the altar, clutching my bouquet with trembling hands. The USB drives pressed against my palm through the flower stems, small but heavy with the power to destroy everything Madison had built. The music swelled, and she appeared at the entrance, a vision in white that drew gasps from the crowd. Father walked beside her, his chest puffed with pride, completely unaware that his golden child was a criminal who'd leveraged their love for profit. As Madison glided down the aisle, I caught sight of several faces in the crowd that I now recognized from her files. Judge Pemberton, whose gambling debts Madison had proof of. CEO Morrison, whose affair with his secretary Madison had documented in vivid detail. State Senator Rodriguez, whose son's drug arrest Madison had covered up for a price. They all watched her with fixed smiles, but I could see the fear behind their eyes. How many of them were here not to celebrate, but because they couldn't afford to offend her. The ceremony began with the traditional words about love and commitment, each phrase a mockery of the truth. Richard's hands shook as he held Madison's, and I saw her squeeze them in warning. The officiant, an old family friend of the Sterlings, droned on about the sanctity of marriage, while I watched Daniel Chen in the third row, his face a mask of barely controlled emotion. The woman he loved was marrying another man, while carrying his child, binding herself to a lie that would trap them all. If anyone here knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, the officiant intoned, "Speak now or forever hold your peace." This was it, the moment I'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. My heart hammered so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Madison's eyes flicked to me, a clear warning in her gaze. But I was done being warned, done being silenced, done being the family disappointment who stayed quiet to keep the peace. I stepped forward, my movement causing a ripple of whispers through the crowd. "I have something to say," I announced, my voice carrying clearly across the venue. Mother's face went white. Father half rose from his seat, and Madison's perfect smile finally cracked. "Bella," she said sweetly, though her eyes promised murder. "This isn't the time." But I was already walking to the microphone set up for readings, pulling the USB drives from my bouquet as I went. My sister Madison has always been the perfect one. I began addressing the crowd that watched in fascinated horror. Perfect grades, perfect career, perfect husband-to-be. Growing up, I was always told to be more like her. Today, I want to tell you all exactly who Madison Morrison really is. The videographer, sensing drama, zoomed in on my face as I plugged the first USB into the laptop connected to the projection system the Sterlings had installed for their photo montage. What happened next was chaos. The screens around the venue meant to display romantic photos of the couple instead filled with documents. Banking records showing mysterious deposits, emails discussing arrangements, and payment schedules. Photos of Madison with various men, each labeled with what she had on them. The crowd erupted in shocked exclamations as they recognized themselves or their colleagues in the files. Madison lunged for me, but I'd anticipated that, stepping aside as I continued speaking. "This wedding is a sham," I announced, my voice growing stronger. "Richard Sterling is gay, forced into this arrangement by family pressure and Madison's blackmail. She has files on half the people in this room, extorting money and favors to build her career. She's not a successful lawyer. She's a criminal who's been running an extortion ring since law school." Richard's face showed pure relief, even as his father shouted for security. But I wasn't done. "She let our parents bankrupt themselves for this wedding, while she has hundreds of thousands in blackmail payments hidden away." I continued, finding my parents' stunned faces in the crowd. "She destroyed my career, tried to have me arrested, and pushed Richard to attempt suicide rather than risk her empire being exposed. The woman in white isn't a bride. She's a predator who's hurt everyone who ever loved her." Madison finally reached me, her hands going for my throat, but Caroline and several others pulled her back. Her perfect composure shattered completely as she screamed threats and obscenities, the mask finally off for everyone to see. "You stupid bitch! You've ruined everything. I'll destroy you. I'll destroy all of you." The wedding dress tore as she fought against the people holding her, revealing the body microphone she'd been wearing to record her own wedding for later leverage. Daniel stood up in the crowd, his voice cutting through the chaos. "I'm Professor Daniel Chen, and Madison's been blackmailing me for months. She's pregnant with my child and threatening to claim assault if I don't pay her. I have recordings of everything." His confession opened the floodgates. Other guests began standing, sharing their own stories of Madison's manipulation and extortion. Judge Pemberton admitted to paying her off. CEO Morrison confirmed she'd threatened to expose his affair. The police arrived within minutes, someone having called them the moment the files appeared on screen. Madison was still screaming as they handcuffed her, her wedding dress now torn and stained, her carefully styled hair wild around her face. "This is all lies," she shrieked. "I'm Madison Morrison. I'm marrying Richard Sterling. You can't do this to me." But the evidence was overwhelming, and there were too many witnesses now telling their stories. As they led her away, she caught my eye one last time. For a moment, the rage cleared, and I saw something else there: fear. For the first time in her life, Madison had lost control, and she didn't know how to handle it. "Bella," she called out, her voice different now, almost pleading. "Bella, please. I'm your sister." But I turned away, unable to summon any sympathy for someone who'd caused so much pain. The wedding venue emptied quickly, guests fleeing the scandal as fast as their luxury cars could carry them. But some stayed, the victims of Madison's schemes, gathering to share stories and contact information for the inevitable lawsuits. Richard hugged me with tears streaming down his face, finally free from the prison Madison had built around him. Caroline stood with her arm around her brother, their family's rejection momentarily forgotten in the face of shared relief. My parents sat in their chairs, looking older than I'd ever seen them. The reality of what Madison had done, of what they'd enabled and ignored, was written in every line of their faces. Mother's perfect makeup was ruined by tears, and father stared at the scattered wedding programs as if they held answers to how everything had gone so wrong. I wanted to comfort them, but I didn't know how. The patterns of a lifetime couldn't be undone in a moment, even one as dramatic as this. 3 months after Madison's arrest at her own wedding, I sat in my new office at the veterinary clinic, watching the leaves turn gold outside my window. The nameplate on my desk read, Dr. Bella Morrison, head veterinarian. A promotion Dr. Harrison had insisted on after everything I'd been through. "You showed more courage in that wedding than most people show in a lifetime," he'd said. "That's the kind of person I want running my clinic." The legal aftermath had been swift and severe. Madison was charged with extortion, blackmail, fraud, and conspiracy, facing 25 years in federal prison. Her carefully maintained files had provided prosecutors with everything they needed for an airtight case. She'd tried to broker a plea deal offering to testify against her victims in exchange for leniency, but even her lawyers had advised against it. There were simply too many powerful people who wanted to see her locked away. My parents' situation was more complicated. They'd lost the houses I'd feared, but the Sterling family had quietly paid off their debts in gratitude for exposing Madison before she became legally bound to their son. Richard had publicly come out 2 weeks after the failed wedding, supported by Caroline, and surprisingly, his father. "I almost lost my son to preserve a lie," Senator Sterling had said at the press conference. "No political career is worth that." The relationship with my parents remained strained but was slowly healing. They'd started therapy both individually and as a couple, trying to understand how they'd created such a toxic family dynamic. Mother had actually apologized, words I'd never thought I'd hear from her. "We put so much pressure on Madison to be perfect," she'd said through tears. "And we made you feel worthless. We failed both our daughters." It wasn't enough to erase years of pain, but it was a start. They lived in a small apartment, now humble but clean, and we met for dinner once a week. The conversations were stilted at first, all of us learning how to be a family without the roles we'd played for so long. Sometimes Mother would slip, starting to criticize my appearance or choices, but she'd catch herself and apologize. Father was learning to actually see me asking about my work with genuine interest instead of barely concealed disappointment. Daniel was raising his daughter with his extended family's help. He'd named her Hope, and despite everything, he sent me photos occasionally. She had Madison's eyes, but Daniel's gentle smile. He'd testified at Madison's trial, his voice steady as he recounted the blackmail and manipulation. Afterward, he'd found me in the courthouse hallway. "Thank you," he'd said simply, "for giving my daughter a chance at a normal life." Richard and I had become unlikely friends, bonded by our shared survival of Hurricane Madison. He was working at an LGBTQ+ advocacy organization, using his family's connections for good instead of political gain. We met for coffee monthly, comparing notes on our healing journeys. "She was so convincing," he'd say, sometimes still amazed at how completely Madison had fooled everyone. The perfect predator in the perfect disguise. Caroline had become one of my closest friends. She'd launched a podcast about toxic family dynamics and the pressure to maintain appearances at all costs. Our Story with Names Changed had been her first season, and the response was overwhelming. Thousands of people wrote in with their own stories of family members who'd manipulated and exploited them, finding comfort in knowing they weren't alone. The veterinary clinic had become my sanctuary. Without the constant stress of Madison's machinations, I'd flourished in my work. We'd expanded our services, added new staff, and I'd even started teaching at the local veterinary school. The animals didn't care about family drama or failed weddings. They just needed someone who cared, and I had plenty of care to give. Jake and I had cautiously reconnected. He'd been instrumental in proving Madison had planted evidence to frame me, and his testimony had helped secure her conviction. We weren't back together yet, but we were working on building something new. "I should have fought harder for you," he'd said during one of our walks. "I should have realized something was wrong instead of just walking away." The strangest development was the support group I'd accidentally started. After news of the wedding fiasco went viral, people reached out with their own stories of toxic siblings, manipulative family members, and the struggle to break free. We met monthly in the community center, a dozen or so survivors sharing our experiences and coping strategies. It turns out there were a lot of us people who'd been labeled the family disappointment, while the golden child got away with terrible things. Madison had been denied bail and was serving her time in a federal facility 2 states away. She'd written me once a letter full of justifications and accusations blaming everyone but herself for her downfall. I'd read it once and thrown it away. Some relationships couldn't be salvaged, and ours was one of them. The sister I'd wanted to love had never really existed. In her place was a stranger who'd seen me only as an obstacle or a tool. On my 29th birthday, I hosted a small gathering at my apartment. Caroline brought her new girlfriend Richard, came with his boyfriend Daniel, sent a card with Hope's handprint, and my parents arrived with a homemade cake. Dr. Harrison and his wife joined us along with Jake and several friends from the support group. It was an odd mix, people brought together by trauma but staying for the healing. As I blew out my candles surrounded by chosen family who actually saw and valued me, I thought about the journey from that horrible wedding day to here. I'd lost a sister but found myself. I'd been labeled the family disappointment, but discovered my own worth had nothing to do with their labels. The truth had cost me everything I thought I knew about my family, but it had given me the freedom to build something real. Speech. Caroline called out, raising her glass of wine. I stood looking around at these people who'd stood by me when everything fell apart. 3 months ago, I spoke the truth at my sister's wedding and destroyed the lies our family was built on. I began. I thought I was ending something, but I was really beginning. Beginning to live as myself, not as someone's disappointment or someone's victim. Just Bella. To just Bella. Richard toasted and everyone raised their glasses. Even my parents smiled, finally seeing me as enough exactly as I was. The apartment filled with laughter and conversation, the sound of real connection replacing years of false perfection. Outside autumn was giving way to winter, but inside, surrounded by warmth and acceptance, I'd finally found my spring. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I stood at my window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Madison sat in a cell, probably plotting her appeal or her revenge. But she had no power over me anymore. I'd spoken my truth, broken the silence she'd demanded, and in doing so, I'd set us all free. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't keeping quiet to preserve the peace. It's speaking up to shatter the lies, even when it costs everything. The next morning would bring new challenges, new clients at the clinic, continued work on rebuilding family relationships. But for tonight, I was exactly where I needed to be, in my own space, living my own life, no longer defined by someone else's shadow. The family disappointment had become the family liberator, and that was a title I'd wear with pride. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey of truth, triumphing over deception. If you've ever felt like the black sheep in your family, or been silenced to protect someone else's image, please share your story in the comments below. Your experiences matter, and you're not alone. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it who might need to hear that speaking up is worth it, even when it's terrifying. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell for more real-life stories of courage in the face of family dysfunction. And please share this video with anyone who needs to be reminded that their voice matters, that their truth deserves to be heard. Until next time, remember, you are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Stay strong, stay true, and never let anyone silence your truth.